Nutrition guidance has always told us what to eat, but rarely explained what food actually does in our bodies. And guidance without understanding doesn't create healthier people, it only creates confusion. Nutrition has never lacked guidance. We've had food pyramids and we've had plates and percentages, all kinds of visual tools designed to guide us with what we should actually eat. And more recently, we've had new dietary guidelines that were released, consistent with decades of science that we've known, but others represent a shift, particularly in how protein sources and saturated fats are emphasized without a clear explanation of why, what is the science behind these recommendations. And recommendations without clear explanation become harder to know how to apply them in real life. The gap between guidance and understanding is where a lot of confusion lies. In this episode, I want to set things straight. I want to bring some clarity back into the conversation and get back to the basics. I want to talk about why earlier recommendations existed, what different foods do in our body, and how to think about nutrition guidance using physiology and not just headlines and graphics. Because when we understand what food is doing inside our bodies, we're better equipped to evaluate these new recommendations thoughtfully and make choices that actually support our health. I can't wait to get into it. Welcome to Fuller Living, your space for empowerment, inspiration, and practical health nuggets. Here you'll find relatable guidance that fits your everyday life as you journey to a fuller and healthier you. I'm your host, Dr. Asha Tate. Let's dig in. Welcome back to Fuller Living, wherever you are coming in from. As always, I am so glad that you're here. I wanted to have this conversation now because nutrition is one of those areas where so many of us are genuinely trying to do the right thing, and yet it often feels so confusing than it really needs to be. I mean, one day eggs are good and the next day they're not. Carbs are good sometimes and carbs are bad. Really, what should we be following? As a family doctor, I spend a lot of time helping make sense of health information. And lately, I've been seeing a lot of questions circulating around following the newly released dietary guidelines. People want to know, what should I actually be eating? Which guidance am I supposed to follow? And why does it feel like recommendations change every time I turn around? I also want to be clear about my intention with this episode. I'm not here to give you a dietary plan. I'm not here to tell you what to eliminate. I am definitely not here to add more pressure around food. But what I do want to do is bring some understanding of the biology and physiology back into the conversation. Because when we understand what different foods actually do inside the body, how they affect our blood vessels, our blood sugar, our energy, our long-term health, nutrition stops feeling like a guessing game. It starts to make sense. So today, we're going to talk about where our food guidances come from, why recommendations like My Plate were helpful, and how to think critically about newer guidance by coming back to the science. What does the science show us about how food works in the body? The goal is to increase our understanding and using that understanding to make choices that actually feel supportive of your health and sustainable. But before we talk about how food works in our bodies, it's actually helpful to understand our nutrition guidelines, how and why they were designed, what they were supposed to do, and why they've changed over time. So, the original US food pyramid, it was created as a population level visual guide to represent the recommended dietary patterns across broad food groups based on the best available evidence at the time. Remember, science is changing. As we learn better, our recommendations change. Over the years, however, it became clear that the pyramid wasn't translating well into everyday eating. Research and policy analyses show that people struggle to apply the pyramid in real meals. The visual hierarchy emphasized certain food groups, particularly grains, in a way that was really easy to misinterpret. And it didn't clearly reflect food quality or balance within a single meal. In response, the food pyramid officially got retired in 2011 and was replaced with MyPlate. MyPlate represented a shift in how guidance was communicated. It wasn't necessarily a rejection of science completely. Instead of that hierarchy, it represented a food plate, something people can relate to. It emphasized proportional balance across different food groups and allowed for flexibility within cultural preferences and access. There's subsequent research that shows that awareness of my plate is actually associated with better overall diet quality, and it suggests that visual approaches actually help people think better about their food structure and how to structure their meals. Again, my plate wasn't designed to explain why or to have all the answers, but it was very helpful. It was designed to make evidence based eating patterns easier to visualize and apply. Mentioned earlier, we have new dietary guidelines. And as with any update, parts of the guidance still reflect some of our long-standing evidence, including an emphasis on whole foods and adequate protein intake. But where concerns arise is how certain foods are prioritized visually, especially protein sources and saturated fats. And this comes without sufficient explanation of how these priorities still align with our existing evidence on cardiovascular health. That lack of clarity really matters because decades of nutrition research consistently show that diets that emphasize unsaturated fats and plant forward foods are associated with better cardiovascular or heart outcomes. And when guidance highlights foods that can increase saturated fat intake while still recommending that you limit those fats, it becomes difficult to reconcile the message without understanding what's actually happening in your body. So, my friends, this is where I hope to provide some clarity. When we understand what food is doing in the body, how different fats affect your blood vessels, how protein influences your satiety or how full you feel, and influences your muscle health, how carbs impact your blood sugar, nutrition guidance becomes easier to interpret thoughtfully, especially when the recommendations change. Remember, we can change the guidance all we want, but our biology and physiology do not change. So let's start with fat because this is where I find a lot of confusion lives. Dietary fats behave very differently once they're inside your body. And the reason certain fats have been limited in the past recommendations have everything to do with what they do in our blood vessels over time. So I'm going to talk about two types of fats today. First, let's talk about saturated fats. Saturated fats are found in foods like butter, fatty cuts of red meat, full fat dairy, and certain cooking fats. When we consume higher amounts of saturated fat, one of the most consistent effects is we see an increase in LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is your bad cholesterol. It's the type that can deposit onto the walls of your arteries. Over time, those deposits contribute to plaque buildup, which narrows the arteries and makes them stiffer, less flexible. That process doesn't usually cause symptoms right away. It builds up quietly over time. And as the plaque accumulates, the blood flow to the heart, the brain, your organs becomes limited. That's what increases your risk of heart attacks and strokes and peripheral vascular disease, and even vascular dementia in life later. This is why saturated fats have historically been limited in dietary guidance. They affect the physical structure of blood vessels over time. Very important to know. The second type of fats are unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats behave differently in your body. These are fats that we find in foods like olive oils, nuts, seeds, avocados, fatty fish. When unsaturated fats replace saturated fats in your diet, your LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol, goes down. This means you have less cholesterol floating around clogging up your arteries. So, when the earlier guidelines suggested that we limit saturated fats in our diet and prioritize unsaturated fats, the goal was simple and clear. It was to reduce plaque formation in our arteries and support long term blood flow to the heart and brain. Fat is essential, but the right type and balance really matter, especially when we're talking about cardiovascular health, which is the number one killer. Next, I want to talk about protein. Protein is also very essential. There's no doubt about it. When you eat protein, your body breaks it down into amino acids. These amino acids are used for various functions like building and maintaining your muscle, repairing tissues, supporting your immune function, helping build enzymes and hormones that support our bodies. Protein also plays a very important role in satiety. Satiety is how full you feel after you've had a meal, and it can slow down the rise of blood sugar when you have a huge carb load. So, this is why meals that include an adequate amount of protein help reduce your cravings or that constant snacking cycle because you're feeling full longer. Muscle is not just about strength and appearance. It is an actual metabolic organ and it helps regulate your blood sugar. It helps support your balance, mobility. It helps protect our independence as we age. In fact, the more muscle that you have as you age, the longer you live. So, an adequate amount of protein intake is one of the ways that you preserve your muscle over time. This is why protein really matters. Now, here's the thing. Protein doesn't exist in isolation. Foods that contain protein come packaged with fats and fiber and other nutrients, and that package actually matters. Animal protein tends to come with higher amounts of saturated fat, depending on the cut and the preparation. Plant protein sources, on the other hand, like beans, lentils, peas, other seeds, and nuts, come with fiber and unsaturated fats. This is why plant forward dietary patterns have consistently been associated with better cardiometabolic outcomes. This doesn't mean that animal protein has no place or that it's bad for you. It just means that right balance and proportion matters. The next piece of that system is carbohydrates, or carbs for short. Carbs are the body's preferred source of energy, especially for the brain and nervous systems. So, when you eat carbs, your body breaks them down into glucose or sugar. Glucose is that primary energy unit, and the body uses it to fuel your brain, your red blood cells, your muscle during most of your daily activity. It's literally what our bodies function and depend on. Now, it's important to make a distinction between the different types of carbohydrates that we take in. There are processed carbohydrates. These are foods where the fiber has largely been removed. For example, white bread, pastries, sugary cereals, sweets, baked goods. I know, don't come for the messenger. Those carbs are absorbed very quickly. That rapid absorption tends to lead to sharp spikes in your blood sugar, followed by sharp drops, which can feel like fatigue or irritability, you feeling shaky, intense hunger, wanting that sweet. Complex carbs, on the other hand, behave differently. These are carbohydrates that still contain the fiber and its full structure. And examples of that include, you probably guessed it, vegetables, fruits, beans, lentils, whole grains like oats. I think you're getting the picture here. Because fiber slows digestion, these carbs enter the bloodstream more gradually. Your blood sugar doesn't spike up so quickly. And that leads to steadier blood sugar and more sustained energy and better satiety or feeling full longer. This is exactly why the My Plate guidance aimed to encourage foods that are rich in fiber and support your blood sugar regulation, digestion, and your long term cardiovascular health. So, putting it all together, healthy fats protect your blood vessels, protein supports your muscle and early satiety, and carbs fuel your system. None of these work in isolation. all of these food groups really matter and they're all not created the same. And once we stop isolating nutrients and start thinking about how your body works, food becomes much more easier to approach. One of my favorite books of all times is called Eat to Live. It's by Dr. Furman. I really believe it changed my life. It helped me look at food in a different way. And if you're looking for a source to go deeper, I encourage you to pick it up. I think you're going to love it. Food was never meant to feel stressful. Eating should not feel like it's a test that you're about to fail. I mean, food really does matter. Without it, we die. When meals include a mix of protein and carbs and fat all in the right amounts, when you understand what you're doing, something then shifts. Your energy becomes more steady, your hunger cues start to make more sense, and food stops taking up so much mental space. I personally find the My Plate method to be the best guidance that we have. If you want to learn more, you can go to myplate.gov. The last time I looked, it was still available online. And it encourages you to fill up half of your plate with vegetables, and it makes a distinction between whole grains and processed carbs. And it encourages that you prioritize low fat over or fat-free dairy over full fat options. And now you know exactly why. Here we are at the end of the episode. And as you know, I always bring us back to a SMART goal. If you don't know, a SMART goal is a goal that's specific, measurable, attainable, and time bound. So for the next 7 days, I want you to aim to include nutrients of fat, carbs, protein, but I want you to focus on what is it that's on my plate. Just start noticing. That's it. So specific, notice what is on your plate. Measurable, did I do it or not? Achievable, I think we can all notice what we're eating. Relevant, this is tied directly to your physiology and it is tied to your goal to live a healthier and fuller life. And time bound, we're going to do this in 7 days. Nutrition doesn't have to be confusing. When you understand it, you're better to make choices that support your body long term. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found this helpful. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. This is how we're going to grow this podcast and hopefully impact more people to live healthier and fuller lives. I really can't wait to see you on the next episode. Until then, let's get to fuller living. Well, fam, that wraps up another episode of Fuller Living, where we talk about health in a bite-sized, relatable, practical, and fun way. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress one small step at a time while remaining consistent. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, share it with a friend who might need a little bit of inspiration, and leave me your 5-star review. And if you're in Dallas and looking for a new PCP, look me up at southwestfamilymed.com. I can't wait to meet you. Until next time, let's get to fuller living.